On a night so still that even the wind seemed to hold its breath, the moon hung low and heavy over the dense forest, casting a silver veil across the twisted branches. In a small, weathered cabin at the edge of the woods, a man named Salim sat at a wooden desk, his pen scratching across yellowed pages that smelled of time and dust. He was a wandering writer, gathering stories from the mouths of elders, wanderers, and those who claimed to know things the world had long forgotten. He was searching for a tale that had never been told, a story that would make him weep before it moved anyone else. Since his childhood, he had heard whispers of an ancient legend that few dared to recount. It spoke of a ghoul who had once been human, a woman who loved and was betrayed, whose tears had turned the earth dark and whose voice had been silenced by fire and fear. No one had seen her and lived to describe the truth. No one had dared enter the forest where her sorrow still lingered. One evening, driven by an unexplainable compulsion, Salim took his small lantern and his notebook and ventured into the forest. The trees loomed like silent walls, their shadows twisting as if alive, and the wind whispered secrets in a language he could not understand. Every step he took seemed to echo with unseen eyes, and he felt a presence following him, patient and unseen, moving through the mist as though it had always belonged there. Suddenly, by an ancient, leaning tree, he saw a figure seated on a moss-covered stone. She was pale as moonlight, her long black hair spilling to the ground, and her gray eyes held centuries of sorrow. The air around her shimmered, and for a moment he questioned whether she was flesh or spirit. "Are you the ghoul they speak of?" he asked, his voice trembling. She smiled, a smile that was not human, a smile of pain and longing intertwined. "I am no longer the ghoul you seek. I am only the shadow of what she once was." Salim sat down slowly on a fallen log, opening his notebook. The wind stirred around them, carrying leaves that danced like letters waiting to be written. "Why do you speak to me now?" he asked. "Why reveal yourself to a stranger?" She looked up at the moon, her voice soft as a sigh. "Because every story deserves a witness, and every sorrow a pen. I was once a woman named Ruba, living in a village at the foot of these mountains. I loved a man as the rain loves the dry earth, but he betrayed me, sold me with his fear and lies, accusing me of witchcraft because I could see what others could not. They burned my home, my life, my very soul, but the fire did not destroy me. It changed me. I became what they feared, what they called the ghoul." Salim wrote furiously, his hand trembling, the words heavier than ink, deeper than any story he had ever told. "Why did you not destroy them?" he asked softly, fearing the answer. "Because anger cannot restore what is lost. It only kills what remains of humanity and those who survive," she replied. Her eyes met his, searching, probing, and then she asked, "Why do you write about me, Salim? Is it curiosity, loneliness, or have you too lost something unspoken?" He paused, his gaze fixed on the shadows around him. "I write to give life to what has died. My mother died when I was a child, and I never said goodbye. Since that day, I have searched in every story for her face, for a woman the world forgot, just as it forgot you." A leaf drifted down and landed on his hand as if the forest itself had heard his confession. She moved closer, whispering, "Perhaps this is why the moon chose you, Salim. Because you are not afraid of the dark." At that moment, the night seemed to shift. Shadows deepened, stars blinked as if watching, and her voice came again, softer than the wind, closer than a dream. "If you write my story to the end, you may never return. Everyone who knows the ghoul's secret becomes part of it." Salim lifted his head, steady despite the chill of fear. "Then I will write with the blood of my heart, not with ink alone." She smiled, and the mist rose around them, wrapping them in silver light, blurring the line between the forest and a world he had never known. Salim awoke to a whispering sound, soft as if the wind itself carried a secret, and found himself in a place unlike the forest he had entered. He was in a vast, shadowed hall where the walls stretched into darkness as if they had no end. The air was cold, carrying the scent of ash and old rain, and in the center of the hall stood a massive black mirror, tilted slightly, reflecting the moonlight that filtered through a crack in the stone ceiling. From behind him, the ghoul, Ruba, spoke, her voice gentle yet carrying a weight that pressed on the air. "This is the beginning of the story, and its end. The mirror holds the faces of those who have been forgotten." Salim turned to look at her, and she appeared different from the first time he saw her. She was no longer the frightening ghoul. She was a woman with serene and sad features, dissolving into light and shadow at the same time. "What is this mirror, and why does it seem alive?" he asked. She stepped closer, her movements deliberate and slow. "Every soul that was wronged, every person who died unheard, is reflected here. The mirror was formed from the tears of the guilty and the ashes of the innocent. I was the first to see myself in it, and I have never been able to leave." Salim approached cautiously, seeing shadows move within the black glass as if trapped spirits were trying to escape. Then he noticed something that made him gasp. His own face appeared in the mirror. "Why do I see myself?" he whispered, stepping back. She smiled, a faint, knowing smile. "Because you have become part of my story. You think you write about me, but you write about yourself." Salim sat down on the cold floor, gripping his notebook. "The ghoul is not a monster. She is the memory of those who lost mercy, the echo of those who were never heard." Suddenly, the mirror hummed with a low, mournful sound, and a black hand emerged from the glass, reaching for Ruba. Salim gasped as the ghoul closed her eyes, whispering, "Finish writing. Do not stop. As long as you write, I remain here." She was pulled toward the glass, dissolving into a gray light, a transformation that seemed like liberation rather than death. Salim remained seated, writing furiously, knowing that each word was keeping her essence alive. After a long, tense silence, he dropped his pen, exhausted. The mirror was still, but her face lingered, smiling softly as if it had finally found peace. Salim reached out and touched the glass, seeing his own reflection merge briefly with hers. The mirror had chosen a new writer, someone who could carry her story without fear. A soft whisper emanated from the mirror. "Stories written with compassion never die." Salim understood then that the story was complete, but the ink was alive. He gathered his notebook and closed it, whispering, "I have written you, Ruba, and now I can write myself." The lamp flickered out, and the last page of his notebook slipped into the glass. Only the mirror remained, holding two faces intertwined, a man and a ghoul, smiling in silent eternity. Salim emerged from the forest at dawn, his body weary, his mind heavy with questions and memories that felt heavier than the earth itself. The sky was gray, the wind biting, and the notebook in his hand seemed to pulse with a life of its own. In his eyes, the reflection of the black mirror lingered, of himself and the ghoul united in an eternal dance. He did not speak to anyone along the path. He returned to his silent village and entered his small, dimly lit room, closing the door behind him. Lighting his lamp, he opened the notebook and began to read the words he had written that night. But the words were no longer the same. They moved upon the page, alive, breathing between the lines. He read one sentence aloud, his voice trembling. "Everyone who writes about the ghoul writes themselves into her mirror." The room seemed to contract, the air thickening with a presence he could feel more than see. A whisper rose from the pages. "Do you think it is over? Writing never ends, Salim. It rewrites itself until it is understood." His heart pounded, but he did not flee. He opened the notebook and began to write again, pouring every memory, every detail of the forest, of Ruba, of the black mirror, into the pages. As he wrote, he felt his body weaken. The ink seemed to flow through his veins instead of his blood, binding him to the story as much as it freed it. He held the small mirror he always carried in his pocket and looked into it. To his shock, he no longer saw his own face. Instead, he saw the ghoul's face, calm and serene, smiling as if she had finally found rest. Then he understood the curse and the blessing. The ghoul had not disappeared. She had transferred into him. Writing had been the bridge, and the mirror had united them. His pen and her spirit were now one. He whispered, "Ruba, were you seeking freedom, or someone to remember you as human?" The voice inside him, soft and warm, answered, "I was seeking someone to believe that a ghoul can cry, that a monster can love, and that an ending is not death but a new beginning." Salim smiled faintly and closed his eyes. That night he felt the last remnants of fear leave him. The forest, the mirror, and the ghoul were all a part of him now. He had become the living story, both writer and subject, ink and soul. Years passed, and Salim's tale became a legend in his village. People whispered, "Do not write about the ghoul, for she will write you." Yet, on certain moonlit nights, some writers who wandered into the forest found a small notebook lying on the ground, open to a single page, its ink still wet with words that seemed to breathe. The story does not die when told. It dies only when forgotten. Time moved on, but the story lived, carrying a message across generations. It was no longer only about Salim, nor only about Ruba. It became about love, mercy, and redemption that transcend death and fear. It was about how stories, when written with compassion, never truly end. On the final page of a notebook found years later, someone wrote in a hand both familiar and foreign, "I am Salim. I am Ruba. We are the story that wrote itself with love, not with blood." The legend endures to this day. A story that teaches that monsters are not born but made, and humanity is not lost, only hidden in the shadows waiting for someone brave enough to write it back into the light. The ghoul and the man, writer and subject, are eternally bound, a tale of sorrow transformed into beauty, a reminder that empathy can overcome the deepest darkness. And so, the forest keeps its secret. The black mirror waits quietly, and anyone who dares to write this story discovers that in the act of writing, they too become part of it, their spirit intertwined with the sorrow, the love, and the magic of the ghoul who once was human.